Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to the Old Capital Podcast. We are in the second part of our discussion about how do you build an apartment complex. So with us today, we have Beene, Michael Walker, and Fritz Waldvogel. These are the three guys that put together a $50 million apartment complex that they're building down outside the city of Austin in Austin, Texas. Just an unbelievable opportunity. And in the first half, we kind of talked a little bit about the setup, about why build an apartment complex. Talked a little bit about putting your team together, talked a little bit about opportunity zones, talked a little bit about paying for land before you actually had it entitled. Is that the right way of doing things, or is it just that was the way that was going to have to be done to move forward, and then moving in parallel with the city, making sure that it was going to be entitled as soon as possible? So we're going to continue on our conversation. Again, we're going to offer a little bit in this one. Is going into a little bit of the checklist of what to do first when you want to buy an apartment building. As I said, if there's anything else that you guys want to add to it, make sure that you tell us. As I say, when you get married, speak now or forever hold your peace. If you want to tell somebody that may be thinking about buying land and developing, guys, tell us a little bit if there's any more personal opinions that you have. So let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about, hold this for Lane and Michael. What are the first steps when you're building an apartment building for you guys? Was it finding the equity investors to put into it? Was that first? Was it finding the debt route first, or the land? Or was it the building the development team? So Michael, Lane, kind of help me through what was the first things after you guys made the decisions to build a large 300-unit apartment complex?
Well, our first step was to consult with an architect, and we contacted several, but worked with Scott Stone with Callaway Architects, who I had worked with previously. He's a master from start to finish. And so it was important to take him the survey of the land and for him to come back and say, here's what we would recommend you do. What do you think of this? So we worked diligently. We had weekly meetings with them that would last 2 to 3 hours, and we developed each unit type, which is it's a fairly lengthy process to try to develop the perfect unit. We developed building styles, how the buildings looked, how the product would lay out on the site. So once we got a rough idea of that, it gave us our unit mix, how many units we could build within the zoning that's permitted. And then we were able to finalize our pro forma to where we could go look for financing. Okay.
So Lane, talk a little bit about that. Again, what did you do when it came to financing? Who did you call, and what was kind of the process of that?
So we took what Michael described, and now we have this rough draft of our project. Our project is in parallel with our business plan and our strategy. And we take that to financing. We took it to Old Capital and we said, hey, this is our idea. This is our business plan. It's called Opportunity Zone. It's called Development. Hold the project 10 years. Here's this rough sketch of what we're trying to build. Here's where it's located. Here's the market study that we've done so far. Here's our projected revenue sources after it's constructed. And then here's our budget for what the construction is. Let's piece this together. And we looked together with you and your staff, Paul, of different options. And we paralleled that with the HUD program that Fritz set us up with. So now we've got the business structure. We've got the strategy. We've got the market, the location, Austin, like we talked about. We've got a team. We've got management. We've got construction. We've got financing. We've got the architect. And now it's about the project. And at that point is where you have to kind of put the cart in front of the horse. So before I write my name on the list to say I'm going to be obligated to $52 million of the project cost, is where I start reaching out to some potential equity investors saying, if we were able to bring this project with this type of financing and this type of economic and investment return, would that be something you were interested in investing in? And so that's where you put the cart and the horse parallel. I raise debt, I talk to the debt lender, and at the same time, I'm kind of teasing, if you will, my investment group to find out their interest in a project, location, market, team, and returns that we're offering.
Fritz, tell me a little bit. So we had a call with Lane. We talked a little bit about the FHA program. Tell us a little bit about what you need, and tell us a little bit about just the initial highlights that a group like Lane and Michael's need to have to get a conversation going with FHA. Walk us through that, what that's like.
So at least on the preliminary sizing and making sure, the loan, we can get to the proceeds that are needed, we'll need a development budget, a year one, stabilized pro forma, as well as any drawings that you have done even from preliminary from an architect would be a great start, because from there we can take a look at the loan to cost test as well as making sure we have enough debt service coverage to meet HUD requirement. And then after we kind of run through that process, okay, this works, we have enough coverage, we have, we can get to a certain loan amount that worked. And then we have to go to HUD for what's called a preliminary meeting, where essentially we go and we present the project, because it's a long process to go through the HUD process. And so we wanted to make sure that we got the initial okay. And so for that, you need to want to make sure you have a market study complete that you can show that there's sufficient demand. At that point, we take a look at the whole team. Who are the guarantors? Who's the contractor that you're thinking? Who's the architect, property management company? What are the guarantors' financials look like? And from there, we put together a memo that we send to HUD, and we have a preliminary in-person meeting. We prefer to do them in person at the HUD office to kind of go through the project. And from there, HUD has approximately 5 business days to say, okay, we're going to invite you in, and we think this is a project that makes sense, or no, we're not interested in this project. And so that process can take, call it 30 days from start to finish.
So talk a little bit about that, because there are some hooks. I remember when Lane going through pilot training, as he would say, he never got any hooks, meaning that all of his flights when he was a junior pilot were perfect. What would be some of the things that could hook you to not have HUD work with you? What were the things maybe that that market study that you have to pay for prior to having the meeting with HUD, what are they looking for?
They really want to see in the market study that there is sufficient demand for additional units. And they'll also take a look at, if they may have some other projects that HUD is doing the construction loans in the area. And so if they have too much supply, they don't want to cannibalize some other projects that are they're in their portfolio that are currently under construction. So those are probably the first two. And then the third, I would say, is making, if the group doesn't have a great team put together, say the developers don't have any HUD experience, and then they try to put together a team of a general contractor, an architect that don't have a lot of HUD experience, that's just going to be a quick no. So you want to make sure you have your team in place before you step into that meeting, because from there, I think Michael and Lane did a great job, presenting and telling their story to HUD. And I think that went a long way, that, HUD was really excited about this project from the get-go.
And again, so the best time to coordinate with the lender is right pretty much after you've got, say, the will and the want to actually build or a property. It's not down the road. It is almost in the front side of the deal. You wanting to make sure that you've assembled the right team, that you're buying land in the right area, that there's no other competition over there. Now, if there is competition and HUD denies the transaction because, again, there's just too much other multifamily stuff that's being constructed, it may not be the right HUD loan, but maybe a construction loan with the bank. So that may be another route to take it. It kind of maybe stops it from going from HUD, but that doesn't stop you from pursuing another way of getting it financed through a credit union or a bank. You may be required to put more money down in those deals. So HUD sometimes is the better way, with less cash, more not being non-recourse into the deal. And so assembling the team is important. Getting the approval from HUD in a person to get the invitation to apply for a HUD loan is important. And then Fritz, you coordinate all that type of stuff, correct?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. Myself and our team will work with you to making sure we have the right paperwork, all the documentation that's needed. As Michael and Lane will tell you, there with HUD loans, there is quite a bit of documentation needing. So you just need to have a little bit of patience as you work through the HUD process.
Yeah. And then so Lane and Mike, let's go back to you concerning raising the equity. I mean, you're going down this parallel path with the cart, as Lane said, in front of the horse behind the cart. When do you start talking with investors, and then who are you talking to that want to go into a development deal? Because development, you're not going to get paid. You're not going to start earning any type of rate of return on your money typically for a couple of years. So how do you go out and do a kind of a road show?
Well, if I can interject something in front of Lane, we work diligently to become experts in opportunity zones. That was step one, because we had to understand the program and the benefits to investors. And we spent a tremendous amount of time discussing the merits of, the tax portion of opportunity zones.
Got it. So Lane, tell me about hitting the road show.
We did, Paul. We had a really great opportunity to go and visit conferences and events where opportunity zones were the focus. And we really, and I say this often, but it's important. There's a 4-step funnel that I try to communicate with everybody I speak with. And that 4-step process is sequential: business strategy, market, team, project. And I talk about each of those. And if you disqualify on business strategy, this is not the right investment for you. And so when I pair what we did in raising equity, I talk about this is a development, the cash flow changes and differences between development and existing. And then I talk about the opportunity zone and how you're able to save a tremendous amount of taxes by investing in this project. And so if they understand the strategy, now I move to the market, okay? And then I move to the team, and then I move to the project. And so some people, this just isn't the right fit for, because like you mentioned, they may be interested in a durable stream of income starting next month. And that's not the right project for them. But if they can hold off and they can delay that demand for yield, and then at the end of the 10-year hold period, if they want a, what I call boom shakalaka, tax-free savings on a real estate great project, this is a soul. It's like eating hotcakes to people that are starving. They want this. They want this real estate opportunity, and it's an easy sell. But it's not a right fit for everyone.
All right. So tell me about
I had to get that message out there.
All right. How did you do it? I mean, did you do a bunch of meetups? Were you out hustling through Realty Mogul and having guys try to crowdfund this deal? Tell me a little bit about how you guys did it.
We looked at all of those, and we did the majority of those. I went to a lot of these like seminars that we mentioned. We established that relationship with those individuals, repeated phone calls. A lot of those individuals are investors, and then that network grew. It was just a lot of hustling, Paul, is the way I was describing it. Getting the message out, getting our marketing out on our website, on our social media, and then having a lot of conversations about what I just described to solicit investors and grow our investor pool. When I first started 2 or 3 or 3 years ago, the investment pool would not have allowed me to buy or to fund this size of project. And you just have to continually network, develop those relationships. And our investor pool is mainly made up of individual investors, maybe your neighborhood sort of blue collar, white collar professionals. There is no private equity money in this particular investment that would stroke one check for the entire project. So it's a tremendous amount of building relationships, trust, faith, and selling your project to individuals.
So you guys raised $12 million. Did you just start putting the money into the account and then just have $12 million show up at the title company? Tell me a little bit about, raising the actual cash to the deal. I mean, to close this transaction, did you have to have $12 million at the closing table?
Our first hurdle was to purchase the land. So we purchased the land $2,850,000. So we put it in our prospectus that the fund would be open once we raised $3 million. So we reached that hurdle. And then from May to, we closed out the fund in mid-December of 2019. The HUD process is good in that, it reduces the amount of equity that you need to go to closing. So we were able to actually raise even just a little bit more money than what we needed. And it's helped us to fund things such as a traffic light. We're working with TxDOT to put in a traffic light on 290 East. And we're working behind the scenes with a lot of different players to help us fund that. So I'll leave it at that right now. But it's helped us to afford to put in an allowance for solar. We're putting in a tremendous solar system with the whole idea to reduce our expenses, especially as we get closer to selling the property 10 years from now. Because as you know, for every dollar you save in expenses, you make a tremendous more when you capitalize that.
Michael, behind your back there, is that a picture of the project? And can you again explain, is it 3 stories? Is it 4 stories? Is it 1 story? Tell us a little bit about the project itself.
It is a garden style. Our goal was to reduce the expenses as much as you can in today's economy, because we wanted to keep the rents affordable in the Manor market. And what I mean by that, when you build 5-story with elevators, there's costs associated with that. And so we went to our architect and contractor early on and said, what is the most effective design as far as costs? They said, absolutely, it's 2 and 3 story combination. 3 stories a little more cost efficient, 2 story gives it a little more attractive. So our project is 2 and 3 story, heavy on the 3 story. We were kind of, it's another story, but city and TxDOT want to someday increase the toll road in front of our property. So they made us push the property back 100 feet. So we gave up 100 feet to the city of Manor and to TxDOT for future planning in our retail right now. So it made us compress the site, go up to 3 story. And we are building it under the green program. So HUD requires it to be very energy efficient. And so we tried to build a property with knowing that we're not merchant builders. We're not going to sell it in 3-4 years. We're going to hold this for 10 years.
So on a project like this, I mean, you have the multifamily living space in the back, but you also have some retail. Tell us a little bit about the retail that is going to be in the front.
Well, early on, the city of Manor, when we first approached them, they said we would welcome multifamily with open arms, but we want retail along the highway. And so we went to our architects and said, okay, how much space do we need for retail? So they literally put down a footprint and said, here's how much room we need for retail. So that left us with 14 and a half acres left over. And so that kind of decided what our total number of units were going to be. So the city of Manor requested that we have retail. So that's part of our purchase. When we went for zoning, we had to carve that out because HUD didn't want to, they either wanted the retail portion in the loan or out. So we kept it out. And now we own almost 5 acres of retail. When we looked at the tax valuation, they valued 2 acres on the front more than they did 14 acres zoned for multifamily. So that tells you the value or the future value of those 2 retail parcels for our investors moving forward.
So when you get a request from the city of Manor, from planning and zoning or the city council, do they tell you, hey, Michael, hey, Lane, we'd like for you to build some retail for us. So we'll make sure everything goes through smoothly if you do what we tell you we want you to do. Is it that kind of a conversation, or are they more like, hey, listen, it would be a great idea if you help us get a little retail over there, that would help us? Did you feel
I think it's the implied intent of, hey, if you help us do this, it's going to be good with zoning. If you don't help us do this, there's going to be somebody with some questions to answer.
That's it. But it made economic sense to do something like this. And then what is like the tenant going to be in the retail? Is that going to be like small medical offices in the front? What type of retail are they expecting you guys to have there?
Their main concern is sales tax. They would like to have sales tax. Real estate taxes are number two. So, we kind of envision it where we have a small retail center on one side and then maybe, as you mentioned, a medical office building on the other side. What we'd love to have is to be able to do something with a ground lease. There is not enough demand right now that, we could really get a great tenant with a ground lease. But that would give us future income and future valuation 10 years from now.
So, this property is not going to be completed for another, 2 years or a year and a half or so from the period of time you guys just broke ground back about a month ago. But, this COVID-19 is going on right now. It may not be the same way it's going to be in the future, but it's probably made you scratch your head a little bit, sharpen your pencils a little bit about how to make some improvements to the property that is going to put better ideas for possible tenants to come into the property. So what are some of the things that you're thinking about building or re-engineering that it absolutely makes sense for people that want to work, live, and play in and around that area, but maybe mostly just work out of their homes these days instead of going to a separate location? So Lane, kind of talk to me a little bit about repurposing some of these units.
Sure, Paul. I think that COVID accelerated a lot of the trends that we're seeing in today's lifestyle. Like you see products and things being delivered to your home more frequently, and COVID accelerated that. You see people working from home more commonly, and COVID accelerated that, demanded it. Education from home. And so a lot of these were trends already in the way people live, but COVID has accelerated that. So prior to COVID happening, we were looking at ways to try to make the next trends, the next modern amenities. And so we implemented in our units smart home technology, the fastest possible Wi-Fi we could get, all smart lighting, smart utility usage, smart locks. We're trying to implement Wi-Fi everything, wireless everything, and as our budget allows, we're trying to implement that in every unit. In addition, we've got in the amenities, we're trying to come up with that. How do people work in the future? How do they educate in the future? How do they exercise in the future? And it's probably going to be more from home. We don't have a crystal clear picture on that. But some of the things we've done is we have in our common space, or like our office spaces, we've made it a configurable WeWork concept, or maybe an education concept to offer that to our tenants. So those are some of the things. Other things, solar, electrical car charging stations available or in every unit. That's going to be groundwater for utilities, smart locking, package our traffic management for the managing of packages as they're delivered to the site or as they're delivered to the unit. So we're trying to really be creative and innovative in implementing those. And you can do that in a development project more easily than in a redevelopment project.
We've also put in the electrical system in 80 garages where we can handle electric car charging in every single garage if we want to.
I think, how far is the new Tesla plant going to be away from you guys?
5 miles.
5 miles. So I would imagine you're going to have a couple Tesla people needing to recharge their cars if they're tenants living at your property. So, I love reimagining the way workspace and living space comes together. So I think that's wonderful, especially in the front side of these deals that you have immediate impact of changing people's lives. One of the things I don't think we talked about really, again, going back to the loan, Fritz, tell me a little bit about the terms that these guys got from HUD. Either you know it or maybe the guys know it. Tell me a little bit about the terms.
We ended up being able to lock the interest rate about 3.27%, just under $40.8 million. which was, it's the HUD process. You don't lock at application. You lock, about a month before closing. So, as we went through the process, interest rates had come down considerably. I believe Elaine and Michael, in your original pro forma, you had just put in, I think, 5% or 4.5%. So, when we ultimately locked the rate in the low threes, I think that added, significant, even more returns than I think that you guys had even expected. So I think overall it was a pretty good execution. That's for 40-year term, fully amortizing at 82% leverage. I mean, I think ultimately it was a really good execution for this project.
And we don't want to forget MIP on this transaction too, because that's part of the equation too. It's an additional expense. What did that cost, Fritz?
It's 25 basis points or 0.25%.
So, I mean, you're all into this deal at a lot less than it would be typically than a regular conventional construction loan. And so that's another benefit of, a non-recourse HUD transaction. Yeah, it may take you a little bit longer, but the benefits sometimes outweigh the actual timing, the cost. So let's talk a little bit about the timing. Give people a perspective about some of the things. Michael, maybe you can kind of walk through it with us that you think are the high points. If people are thinking about trying to build an apartment building of size, can you kind of walk through just the timing and the things that it took for it to be done?
Well, as Fritz said, the HUD process can add a little bit of time to it. From conception to time we closed the loan was basically 2 years. Is that a fair assessment, Lane? And so, we were busy in that time. As I mentioned, we had weekly architectural meetings. That was a key component of it, trying to iron out all the details. And there's a million details to it. It's more than just going to meet your architect. I mean, you're on the phone with them several times a week, reviewing drawings and getting them in front of your partners. The equity raise, Lane spearheaded that, and we took our first investor in April and closed out the fund in December. So we were able to put together our HUD loan, and the closing took a little bit longer, especially with the wetlands, but 2 years start to finish.
So would you say, Lane, to go from in 2 years? I mean, a lot of people say, well, that's a long time. But during that period of time, you had a number of things going on. One, you guys did not have a multi-family experience about building large apartment buildings. You had to assemble your team. That you had to find the right people to find the right match. You had to get the architectural plans and drawings all put together. You get the city rezoning on the property to make sure it was done. You had to secure the HUD financing, which really took maybe about 10 months or 11 months to get done. You had to raise the equity into the transaction, and you had all kinds of subtasks to get done during that period of time, and still have kind of a full-time job of what you were doing too. So, jumping on a bicycle that you don't know how to ride the bicycle sometimes is kind of a challenge. So, you're learning how to pedal, you're learning how to steer all at the same time. So it's going to take that period of time if you've never done it before. But Fritz, what do you think on the next one? Do you think these guys now they've put their team together and now they would cookie cutter the next transaction? Do you think it would take that long?
I think generally it should be quicker your second time around, because a lot of the forms and processes you've really been through. I think Michael added a good point. There's since there was a wetland, there was a certain process that HUD requires that you go to that probably added an extra 2 or 3 months to the process than it would be if it wasn't located in a wetland. So I think overall the process went pretty smooth. I mean, there was a couple things along the way, like I mentioned, the wetlands that, this property and where it was located specifically made the process a little bit longer than what's typical. But I definitely think going forward, now that you have a similar sponsorship group, you got the general contractor, architect, and management company all comfortable with HUD. Now it's a little bit more of a project-specific items, not less about the sponsorship team, because they all have obviously HUD experience.
Would you do this transaction again, Michael and Lane? I know it was exciting to turn shovels over. How big of a crowd was it at your groundbreaking? Tell us a little bit about that important day that it was when you see a plan come together.
I would definitely do it again, Paul. This has been so exciting. I think we have been very successful, and the groundbreaking was a great celebration for a good team putting it all together. It is more challenging. You have to have more funding and more seed money, like we've already discussed, for those particular reasons up front and buying existing property. But to develop versus redevelop, this offers a brand new opportunity, so you can implement a vision that adds value to the community, it adds value to your investors, and it's rewarding. So I would recommend it, but it's not really geared toward a part-time investor. This is a full-time effort and focus.
Michael?
I totally agree with that. Our second time around, we've got the basic product design, so that would go easier. We've got the team that understands what we're trying to do. I probably would not buy a property with wetlands on it next time around. Just like one of my first developments I built on the side of a hill, and it was gorgeous to look at. And then when I learned out the costs of retaining walls, that was a learning experience. So it's a process that's difficult to do when you have a lot of other responsibilities. There were times when Lane and I worked on this full time, both of us. And, it's an exciting process. We would definitely do it again. We have been charting opportunity zones for 2 years now. And we've watched the movement of them, who's purchased what parcels are available, and where we might be able to build. Construction costs do play a part of that. There are several markets we'd like to be in. Like we like Sherman. We like Sherman a lot. It's just the rents are a little bit lower in Sherman than they are in Dallas, Fort Worth, or Austin, to where it doesn't give investors the same yield. So we couldn't get the same loan in Sherman. Couldn't get. We went to New York, we went to Washington, D.C., we went to Denver, we went to Rhode Island, talking to investors and going to real estate forums. And they knew Austin, they knew Houston, they knew Dallas, and they'd say, Sherman, where's that?
Yeah, it's amazing that, that so many investors really want, and these are institutional investors that want to put money into opportunity zones. And they kind of seek you out too, just like Lane. But, what was it like to, again, turn dirt and have 60, 70 people at your groundbreaking ceremony? The mayor comes out and speaks and says good things about you guys and being part of the community. It's not to say that doesn't happen on 30-year-old buildings, but there's so much positive momentum that comes from a brand new construction, especially a $52 million building that's being built in their town. Again, what was that like?
Yeah, the celebration was great, and our strategic came through, and they orchestrated and they put the facilities up, and it was just a fantastic event. The mayor was there. The mayor spoke. The mayor spoke about the need for housing, how that was going to help the community, and how this was an underserved area, but this project was going to be great. So I know that for me, it was a great sense of pride and celebration for our team and just for the community, like you mentioned, Paul. We're adding value, and that's what's exciting.
Let's go around the table. Fritz, is there anything that on the HUD loan that you think folks that have never done it before should know that, again, HUD is only available for, say, multifamily, whether it's senior housing or other types of residential stuff. What are some of the things that folks need to know that maybe they don't know right now?
In my opinion, it's probably the best construction debt product out there right now. You just need to have the patience to get through the process. There's a lot of hoops that you have to get through. But at the end of the day, it's by far, in terms of actual debt terms, the best product on the market. So I would say just make sure you get the HUD lender, your mortgage broker involved early in the process. So it doesn't add additional time, because there's, say when you're designing your building, there's certain HUD requirements. It's better to start from the beginning, and it's a lot more seamless process. And actually, a good rule of thumb that our team likes to say, it's, once you have 90% of your plans and specs done, it's about 90 to 120 days to close from there, as long as you get the process started concurrently with your development.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you. And then Fritz and Colliers, they're one of the top 5 HUD lenders in the nation. And so they're an excellent team of support. They service their loans. They are, they're the best of the best. And so we definitely support them and they support us. So if there's any questions, you can talk to Fritz or myself concerning HUD financing. Guys, last words of wisdom to anybody who's thinking about building a property. Anything else that we should be talking about that looking back that you would want to tell them?
My hat is off to both you, Paul, and you, Fritz. Both of you helped guide us through the process, which navigating HUD waters is, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but your guidance helped make it very navigable.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lane?
I would just advocate to surround yourself with professionals, build a good team, and remember, you have to start to be great.
That's right. That's absolutely correct. We'll end on that. So Lane Beene, Michael Walker, thanks for kind of explaining about opportunity zones, new construction. If somebody wanted to get more information about what you guys do, what's the best way, Lane, for them to get in contact with your team?
Our website's the best, pilot-legacy.com.
So pilot-legacy.com?
That is correct.
All right. Sounds good. Fritz, thanks for being part of the conversation. We do appreciate that. And we'll end the podcast here. Again, I'm Paul Peebles. Thank you, Michael Walker, Lane Beene, and Fritz Waldvogel with Colliers. Thanks for your time. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.